Ingrid, as a young woman, you had a near-death experience. How did this come about? What was the background? There is a sad backstory. I had a very miserable childhood. I grew up without parents and was practically a homeless child. I had to go through many types of abuse, rejection, and I was often alone. Of course, I wanted to belong to a family, but then I started to seek refuge in a realm of fantasy, which means tales, fairies, elves, but primarily also God exists. And there are guardian angels. It seems that this knowledge helped me through the bad times, and it prevented me from stealing as other homeless children did, from being involved in criminal activities, and from going around with children who were evildoers. I could not do all of this because I know that I am observed. God does not want this. And I have my guardian angel, and he was very important. Because I had to sleep outside, because I didn't dare to go home, without this knowledge, I always have had a guardian angel behind me. My life would have been completely different. Finally, at about 14 years old, I became concerned about the next steps. Then I went to the youth welfare office, where I described my life. I told them that I would like to have a school education, a roof over my head, and the possibility of professional training. They rejected me in cold blood and sent me to the industrial area where I could work on an assembly line. And no matter if I had an education or not, I would receive my pay, and I would have a roof over my head. But I was so crushed. This was extremely depressing for me, and so I realized that nobody would help me, and that I could no longer live like this. Now and then I hung out with other homeless children, and I realized that they became drug addicts and criminals, and I didn't want to be like them. I felt rejected by them, so I intended to kill myself. I also have two older brothers who lived with my grandma. In her house, there was a small attic where I could hide away now and then, and so I started to properly prepare it. I got hold of some strong medication, and for this purpose, I burgled my grandma by stealing her cardiac drugs, and also some poison. But today, I cannot remember what exactly. In any case, it was an absolutely lethal dose. Then I waited until both of my brothers, with whom I had little contact, had gone to a party in a neighboring house. Then, without telling anybody about this, I went into the attic and took the poison, which started to work quickly. This means that after a very short time, I could no longer open my eyes. There were pictures as if I would look into the light with my eyes closed. This caused my heart to race so badly, and the pulsations in my ears were probably caused by my heart and my blood. Suddenly, demonic shapes came from all corners. One could say, similar to our understanding of the devil. They had horns and grimaces, and they were sometimes very creepy and half decomposed and frightening, so I was in a state of shock. There was a whizzing and a hooting around me, and I felt that they were getting closer, gloating at their approach. At the moment when I thought that they would catch me, I felt as if I were in a maelstrom and violently being sucked in by my own spine, and this happened very quickly. Then I was ejected into a bright light, which turned out to be the light focused on me in the intensive care unit in the university hospital. How did it come about that they could find you in this attic? This now is the actual miracle. I still remember that before I fainted, for the last time, I prayed to God and said, "Dear Lord, help me. I would like to continue living, but not as before." Then I passed out. Afterwards, the doctor came to my bedside and told me that I had had cardiac arrest, that I had to be resuscitated, and that my blood had to be completely changed. That means that the blood was dialyzed through a carbon filter because my body had been poisoned. Then my brother came and told me the following. He told me again and again, "Ingrid, you have to believe me. This is precisely what happened." And he explained to me that he was at this party and that he already had had a little drink and that he wasn't thinking of me at all because he was simply happy that his annoying little sister was not present. Then a stranger appeared at this birthday party. It seems this stranger was nicely dressed, all in brown, brown hair, brown suit, and he came up to my brother saying, "Get up, go home, and check on your sister." He obviously said this so emphatically and commandingly that my brother actually felt himself forced to get up and to go and check on me. He repeatedly stated that without this man, he never would have gone to check on me. How do you explain this? How can it be that something like this was possible? Well, the only explanation I have for this is that indeed my guardian angel was placed at my side by God at the moment when my life was at stake, because nobody knew my plan, when I intended to realize it, or where I was. If this had been a real human being, a sensible adult, why didn't he immediately call the ambulance? But no, he first went to the party in order to look for my brother, telling him, "Go home to check on your sister," because this behavior implies a loss of time. He could only have been a guardian angel. What else? What happened after your hospital stay? Well, there was another miracle. Because of my serious suicide, there was a court hearing, and there I told the court about my life. One of the listeners in the courtroom, his name was Dr. Hahn, was so impressed by my story that he took on the guardianship of me, thereby helping me to find shelter in a nursing order. And then, after 2.5 years, I could complete the General Certificate of Secondary Education and be educated as a nurse. Later in your life, you had yet another special experience. Could you also describe it? This happened just when I was a new driver. I had my first car, and a very old and rickety Volkswagen at that. At the time, I was living in Diez on the Lahn in a nurse's home, and I went for a visit in Koblenz. I intended to return home very quickly. At that time, there was no obligatory wearing of seat belts, and I was sitting comfortably in the Volkswagen, as one does in an armchair, and then on the country road, I was driving at full speed. Then, however, I got the impression that somebody was sitting next to me in the car. I couldn't see anyone, but it was a male individual. He said, "Ingrid, fasten your seatbelt." But I accelerated, and he said, "Look at the knots and tangles in your seatbelt." Then he said again, "Ingrid, buckle up." Due to my youthful carelessness, I always replied no, because I was too lazy to fasten my seatbelt. And after this exchange, when I said again that I had no desire to do that, and that I intended to return home quickly, all of a sudden, in a flash, in a matter of seconds, I saw pictures of people who were hurled out of their cars through the windscreen with the typical injuries. I was so frightened by this that I left the country road in order to find a parking spot. I untied the knots in my seatbelt and I buckled up. Then I asked the invisible man, "Is it all right this way?" or something like that, and I got the answer, yes. And then again, of course, top speed, toward Diez. I went downhill, but halfway down, the front wheels of my old Volkswagen suddenly locked, and as a new driver, I responded completely incorrectly, so the vehicle started skidding, and according to information given later by witnesses, the vehicle overturned 5 times until it came to rest at the foot of a hill. The vehicle was totally wrecked, but I was unharmed because I was wearing my seatbelt. Can you explain whose or which voice this was? My instinct is that this must also have been the voice of my guardian angel, the guardian angel of my childhood, who basically has always accompanied me. And what consequences did all these special experiences have for your future life? I can't really say this because at that time I was too busy with my own life. I also was under a lot of stress because I had to work on my education, which other apprentices had already done. The only thing I knew was that I had to be a good person. I got the chance to be a nurse and to do good to others, and in this way I could do my best. I realized already during my training that I have special skills. I always could foresee how patients are, if they will recover, if there will be any complications, or if they will die. But I didn't know this because of my professional experience, because I didn't have any as a young nurse, but it was some sort of instinct. I have harnessed this instinct by reaching out to the patients, which means I could console the patients when I knew that one of them would recover, or I could interact with them in a completely different way when I knew that one of them would die, and I could treat them very empathetically. Later on, I worked in an outpatient admission where my professional experience also played a role. But I always could accurately say what was going on with a patient, and also the physicians could finally build on it. Well, I have felt that there are abilities, but after having seen the demons, I always was in fear because I never knew from which side all this originates, from the demon side or from the divine side, and I couldn't really deal with it. It has taken many years before I finally met people to whom I could tell my story and who have believed me, and only now I realized the miracle behind, namely that I was indeed, throughout my life, protected by a guardian angel, at least one guardian angel, who also has saved my life at least 2 times. Well, nevertheless, I am not sad, because I think that all this has shaped my character, resulting in what I am now. Thank you, Ingrid, for this beautiful story.